that crime in Jamaica is directly linked to politics, isn't it, and to party politics?
The roots of it have a link. The current manifestation of it is not primarily political. This is now hard, organized criminal activity involving control of illicit activity, for example, extortion. It involves drug trafficking. Even though we have reduced the volume of cocaine, there is still marijuana, and that still provides a base for a lot of criminal activity. It involves sometimes just plain gang wars.
Are you suggesting to me that the garrison culture, as it's called, is no longer tied to politics in your country?
It no longer dominates. It no longer dominates. Politics is no longer what dominates activities at that level.
You see, I'm puzzled because your own new Interior Minister, Colonel Macmillan, who wrote a report about the crime situation before he took office, he said directly that the link between politics and crime must be cut.
Yes.
So he clearly felt it was still very important.
Yes, well, yeah, but we're not talking at cross purposes. There was a time when politics introduced criminal activity, many years ago, 40 years ago. What is happening now is that politics, in the way in which areas are maintained as homogeneous, politically loyal communities.
Basically, neighbourhoods are run by thugs and gangs who have affiliation to either your party, the Labour Party, or the People's National Party, the opposition
It
party.
undermines crime-fighting activities because it does provide, I wouldn't say a firewall, but it does provide an obstacle to effective policing. And that is something that we have to address. What are we planning to do? We have already committed ourselves to introducing in Parliament measures that would sanction, would impeach members of Parliament if they breach fundamental codes of the political code of conduct as a critical tool to dismantling garrisons. We are going to identify, for example, those contractors who have been receiving government contracts and who are themselves involved in garrison activity, and they'll be taken off the government contractors list. All of these are
Prime Minister, if I may, you sound as though you're
manifesto.
completely detached from this. You actually you represent a constituency that is dominated by garrison politics.
Yes, with the lowest crime rate in the entire Jamaica.
But with respect, that does not prove that organised crime isn't taking place. It just proves that perhaps some of the criminals have a very effective way of avoiding arrest.
No, what it proves is that there's a transformation that has been taking place in West Kingston, going back over the last 5 years, that we have continued to sustain and continued to entrench.
See, I just look back to a certain Bruce Golding, i.e. a younger version of you, who walked away from the traditional two-party system. You tried to create your own political movement in the mid to late 90s, and you said, political tribalism, the use of violence in political activities, the creation of political garrisons, all this was nurtured and nourished as strategic initiatives to secure or retain political power.
A statement of fact.
Why did you then abandon your independent mission and go back into the traditional political party with its garrison culture?
Because I wanted to do more than simply pontificate and offer commentary from the sidelines. I wanted to transform. And that is what we have in fact been doing. You look at the last two elections and you will see the extent to which much of the tribalism that defined previous elections, much of that has abated. It's a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes will. It takes determination. And that is what I'm here to do, to provide that.
And when it comes to this problem you have, that Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and many others have catalogued, with your own police force acting with impunity and killing large numbers of your own people, how are you going to stop it?
It's a transformation that has to take place. It's a culture that has to be uprooted. For many, many years, you know, Jamaica lived under the Suppression of Crime Act for many, many years that gave the police extraordinary powers. Even when those powers were removed, some of them, it's hard to take it out of the culture because you're dealing with a force, the majority of whom grew up under that system, where abuse of people's rights, extrajudicial killings almost became part of the way of fighting crime. That has to change. it has to change through new leadership, it has to change through a new culture, a new organization, and importantly, a new system of accountability. But those are works in progress, and it's going to take time before they begin to have the kind of effect that we want.
It's all about trust, isn't it? If we're talking about policing, if we're talking about getting rid of the garrison culture and the thugs and the...
Trust and accountability.
Well, let's talk about it then, because in the last year, and again, I'm picking on this last year because you've been in charge for 8 months now, Transparency International, in the latest list of the World Corruption Index, Jamaica has dropped down 23 places. It's now 84th when it comes to clean government. You're one of the worst, most corrupt governments in the Caribbean.
Transparency International, those are not the figures that I recall. What year are you talking?
I just checked on their website. You've dropped 23 places down their league table.
And that is for what year? For 2007?
That's for 2007. It's the latest figures they've got.
For which I was responsible for less than 4 months?
Well, I'm not suggesting. I'm not suggesting.
But you have been.
I'm not suggesting I can pin it all on you. I'm suggesting that you
keep pinning this. Keep pinning this to the fact that I have been in charge for the last 8 months.
I'll tell you what I pin it on.
That's what I inherited.
I'll tell you what I pin it on. The swearing-in ceremony, when you said, and again I'm quoting you, corruption in Jamaica, you said, is much too easy. It's risk-free. Public officials will be impeached and removed from office if they're found guilty of corruption. So how many senior
but why
public
are you being
officials
so selective in the research? Why are you being so selective in the research that you do? Why has your research not told you that we have before Parliament now a bill to repeal the Corruption Prevention Act, to replace it with a new act, to establish for the first time a special prosecutor whose exclusive function and responsibility will be to investigate, prosecute persons in public life who are involved in corruption? I mean, you're at such great pains to tell me about all the ills of Jamaica, and you haven't taken the trouble to see what initiatives that this government that I lead has taken to address those problems. That bill is before Parliament now. I'm hoping to have it passed into law within the next 2 months.
Yeah, no, I'm not at pains to paint a particularly bleak picture. I'm just looking at the record, and I'm seeing there are still profound problems. One major Spanish tourism company, which was planning a big investment in Jamaica, has frozen the investment. Another, quoted by the Gleaner newspaper in Kingston, has said, quote, "The investment atmosphere is unfriendly and antagonistic." And if you look at the security situation...
Have you done any investigation into that?
What do you mean
investigation? There are two
investigation?
situations that you need to look at. Firstly, the Spanish investments that came to Jamaica for a particular reason. Because Jamaica provided them with an ideal English-speaking destination to enable them to access the North American leisure market. And that's good business, and we welcome them and we have facilitated them. The North American market, the U.S. market, as you know, has turned sour. And what the Spanish investors have said to us is that because the U.S. market is soft, we're going to have to slow down in terms of the speed with which we were developing new accommodation in Jamaica. And we accept that. There's one particular company that has a difficulty because they were constructing a hotel in violation of the building permit that was granted. And we said to them, we had to issue an order on them to stop, to correct the breaches that have taken place, and we have urged them to do it as quickly as possible so that they can complete the project and we can get some more tourists coming.
So you don't think that the current security situation, the State Department's record, reporting of corruption still being commonplace in business deals in Jamaica,
has impacted on that?
The
I don't think
policing
so.
situation, none of this that we've talked about today, you think creates a difficult environment to attract investment from
I don't
overseas?
think that any of those are impacting particularly on the Spanish investment.
Well, let's take the wider question, which is Jamaica right now a place where the international community really wants to invest, that really sees Jamaica as stable?
Well, it is, despite the crime rate, because investments continue to flow. We are negotiating now with some major new investment. We have one hotel investment, resort development alone, where we're talking about between $5 and $7 billion US of investment. I just concluded negotiations with another group for an investment of 2.2 billion US dollars. So that's not the problem. And these are issues that existed even before the Spanish came there. There are certain challenges that we have to work out with them, and we're resolving those.